Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of Outbound for Dummies with Outplay, where we break down all things outbound sales with some really killer, beloved sales experts from the industry. And today we're going to talk about something really important, which is setting up multi-channel sales cadences that actually work and deliver results. And to do that, we have an Outplay favorite, Harinie Sekaran, with us, who is the CEO and founder of Leadle. Now, Leadle is a consulting business that does GTM and lead gen for tech startups, tech B2B startups who want to kind of get access to their dream prospects. So Honey takes care of that and gets that out of the way for you. And as an aside, actually, Harni has some great content on her LinkedIn for salespeople and really tactical content that gets into the nitty gritties. But what I personally really appreciate is how she gets human and empathetic about the people behind the processes. So if you haven't checked her out on LinkedIn, I think you really should. And so we're really excited and happy to have you here, Harni. Hi, welcome to OFD.
Thank you so much, Samhita. You were extremely kind, and as always, it's such a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Awesome. Let's dive right into it. So what I actually wanted to start with was I think the last few years has just changed how very online first and digital we are. So I think
Mhm.
modern sales teams are familiar with multi-channel sales cadences, but there are still legacy teams that rely on the traditional sales approach. So could you just break down what actually differentiates the two approaches?
Right. I'm going to talk about like what cadences are because I feel like some of this jargon we are very familiar with, and then not everybody is. So I think everybody in sales is today familiar with the fact that you need to be able to touch base with a prospect at least more than 6 times, right? And this sequence of messages that goes out to them, and it can go in any channel, is basically what a cadence is. So it could be emails, it could be cold calls, it could be whatever you choose to do. That's a cadence. Now, a multi-channel cadence is one where we choose to not use just one single channel. So we don't just do cold calling or emailing. We use all the outbound channels that are available to us. So if you look at what that is, I would say that the scope of that itself has increased quite a bit in the last even 1 year. But I think you can use email, you can use cold calling, you can use LinkedIn, you can use WhatsApp, you can use SMS. And then within WhatsApp and SMS, you can also use, video, voice notes, text messages. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can do. A multi-channel cadence is one where you are using all of these channels to set up 8 or more touch points for every prospect that you reach out to. In contrast, I think several teams even today they rely entirely on cold calling or just on emails. And I'm not talking traditional businesses. I know a bunch of SaaS companies who actually do that today. And then they're completely blown away when we, sort of show them how just multi-channel can make so much of a difference to their process, right? So yeah, that's what multi-channel cadences are.
Got it. And so, I mean, this is news to me actually. It's really interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from the fact that this is not the only way to do things. Cold calls and emails are not the only way to do things. But
Mhm.
when they ask you what are the outcomes and or what is the objective of including multi-channel touch points in your cadence, what do you say to them? What is the objective of going multi-channel?
So it's a good question. It's a question everyone asks. So I'm really glad we're sort of talking about that today. I think the reason you need to do multi-channel is because like there are two or three. I'm going to talk about them as they just occur to me. The first, in my opinion, is because you absolutely need 8+ touch points for every prospect, right? And imagine if you were to get 8 emails from me, or you get 8 cold calls from me over the course of the next 12 days. It is extremely annoying. But when you sort of spread that out over multiple channels and do a combination of hard touch points and soft touch points, it does not seem as overwhelming. So you're able to do what you need to do without annoying the prospect, which is like a big plus with respect to multi-channel sequencing. The second thing is that uh, different channels can be leveraged differently, and this is because of the type of information that buyers want and are open to receiving on platforms, right? So I would say that, for example, if you were to use LinkedIn, I would keep the messages on LinkedIn very high level, right? But very strategic. Because this is a one-to-one connection platform, people are connecting with their peers, and the kind of conversation they're expecting to have a conversation. Second, the kind of conversation they're expecting to have is quite high level on LinkedIn. And then email is potentially where you could sort of talk about your, value propositions, before after scenarios, quantifications, benefits. Now, if you were to do this on LinkedIn, it would not come across well. But then if you do it on email, it's perfectly okay. And then cold calling is that channel where you could, you directly talk to your prospects. So you can ask them exactly what matters to them, understand that, and then talk on the basis of the information that they're sharing with you. So you have that ability to share information with prospects in different ways through different channels, and I do not think it would be possible if you were to use any one channel. For instance, you don't have one is to one connection on email, for example, right? So you need those different channels to be able to do that. So you're able to position yourself a lot better because you have these different channels. And the last reason, in my opinion, is because it generally produces better quality meetings than if you were to do, say, just cold calling or just emailing. And I have a theory around it. I think the reason why it happens is because no prospect is looking at your like very first message and then getting on a meeting. Almost always they're looking at, hey, this connection message is sent on LinkedIn, and then like a day later they got an email about Outplay, right? And then they're looking at, okay, so maybe I really need an SCP that also integrates like all these other functionalities. Let me take a look at it. But now the fact that you're an SCP that integrates these functionalities potentially comes across in the email, but this is who you are, and you handle this process for Outplay, and Outplay is an all-in-one sales tool. Maybe it went out on LinkedIn, right? So when they come in, they have a more, I want to say, holistic perspective of your product, and therefore you have better quality meetings. So these are the primary reasons I would say that you choose multi-channel. These are the objectives of going for multi-channel versus any one single channel or a traditional method.
Awesome. I love how you made it sound so matter of fact, but it's not a simple thing. It's something that can really transform the way people sell. So that's a great
Absolutely. Yeah.
tip. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the million-dollar question: how do sales teams start? So let's say I'm a sales lead who has a team of 5 people doing cold calling and just email each. Now, how do I get them to incorporate multi-channel cadences? How do I get started from scratch?
You're getting me to the questions I really like a lot. Because here's where the strategic bit comes in, right? Like, let's say you're the head of sales. I think the place to start is not really with the channels or with any of that, right? I think the place to start, any good outbound campaign has two important pillars. The first one is the ideal customer profile. The second is what we internally at Leadle call the value proposition matrix. And I will explain that. The ICP, or the ideal customer profile, is a little bit easier because I think everyone understands that terminology. But as commonly used as it is, a lot of people still get it wrong. Right? I still have product companies that come and tell me, so what's your ICP? Oh, everyone is in my ICP. Anyone can buy my product. And when I hear that, I'm always going, no, no, that's not how it's going to work. So let's sit down and drill down. Who do we want to target? Who is a good customer for you today? Who's feeling the pain today and will potentially make a purchase in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, right? So we map that. And you may be able to sell into any industry, but you probably have great use cases in maybe two industries, like just those industries. What size of company? Enterprise and above 5,000 is just too vague, right? You need to sort of get down to like what number, because think about it, right, Samhita? A company at 5,000 employee count has very different problems than a company at a 10,000 employee count, right? So what you talk about to each of them will have to be different. So this, you really get down to it and map the ICP correctly. That's, I would say, step one. And if you're unsure, about which is going to work best for you and you have 5 SDRs, I would say get granular, assign each of them a slightly different ICP and see, what works best for you. It's a good way for you to run like 5 different experiments, right? Let's come then to the value proposition matrix. What we call the value proposition matrix is an extremely detailed breakdown of why and what reasons a buyer has to buy from you. And this is not about your product at all, right? No matter what the product is, I'm not going to buy unless it does something for me. So what you need to do is really understand me really well, right? So the value prop matrix is, let's say, I'm going to just put this out there, right? Let's take Outplay as a product, and you are going to sell potentially to founders in early stage companies. You're going to sell to heads of sales. You're probably going to sell to heads of revenue, for example, right? Now I will take, let's say you're taking a head of sales, that's the buyer persona. You've got to look at what are the three KPAs which Outplay would potentially be able to impact if they made the purchase. And they would have 10, 12, 15. You choose the top two or three that you would be able to impact with your product, right? And then map them down. Then you look at the challenges that are preventing them from accomplishing these KPAs as they relate to Outplay again, right? So that's the second step. What are challenges, top challenges one, two, three? What's stopping them from being able to achieve these three KPIs we've mapped out? Then you get into mapping the product capabilities that allow them to accomplish those KPIs. Then you talk about the value proposition. What does Outplay really bring to the table for this head of sales, right? Why would they not go with ABC competitors? Why would they not just use point solutions, right? You sort of bring that value proposition down, break it down for the head of sales. And finally, what's the before after scenario? I'm sure you have a lot of case studies. So if you can quantify that and say, X A company was able to improve top of pipeline by 30%, after they implemented Outplay, right? For example, and you're able to do those benefit mapping and we keep it to the top three. Now you do this separately for the head of sales. You do this separately for the founder, and maybe you do this separately for the CRO. And I say this because now the head of sales potentially cares about the top of pipeline. The founder only cares about top line and potentially the bottom line, right? And then the CRO is going to care about how can I improve my profitability? All of these tools are just adding up, and you want to probably tell them, hey, this is an all-in-one tool, right? There's no one else like this in the market right now. We integrate all of these things. So they have very different concerns, and you have to map that properly, right? Now, once this is the starting point, when you have this value prop matrix mapped and you have the ICP correctly, then it becomes very, very easy to set up a campaign because you just have to choose what you're going to leverage in every channel. LinkedIn, just talk about the KPIs and problem statements. You want to keep it high level, one-on-one. You can't do that by talking about your product and capabilities. Email, you talk about the product capabilities, you talk about the value proposition and the benefit because you want to corroborate what you're saying somewhere. And as with respect to the cold calling, again, you go back to the problem statement. So you have high level, you have really granular benefit, why of, they should get into the call or the meeting or whatever they're selling there. And this is how I would set up a campaign by really sitting down and doing the strategy bit. Once you've done the strategy, it then becomes really easy to set up a campaign because every message you leverage a different aspect of what you've already mapped in your value proposition matrix. I know that was a very long answer to your question, but
I mean,
I hope it was
guys listening, I hope you took notes because that was like the perfect example of an actionable matrix that you can literally start applying tomorrow. I mean, that was great. That was awesome. I think that also kind of clarifies the question of, I mean, there are so many channels, which should I choose? Should I be on all of it? I think the next question would be, should they be on all of it? I mean, I'm sure there's a bandwidth. And how exactly, I understand that LinkedIn email and SMSs, they perform very different functions, which combined is a
correct.
very powerful statement. But there are a lot more. There's Twitter and there's
Mm.
WhatsApp, all those things. At what point should they incorporate that? Should they incorporate that? When do those other newer channels come in?
Uh, Actually, that's a great question, Samhita, because while I think multi-channel is very important, it is also necessary to know what channels are going to work best for us, right? And I think this depends quite a bit on obviously the budget that you have and also your ICP. So when I talk about ICP, is everything down from geography to the person you're targeting. Give you an example, right? Like we have a lot of customers for whom we target healthcare. Healthcare is a segment, right? So that's hospitals, it is clinics, sometimes it is these radiology centers, for example, right? We would never use LinkedIn for any of these people because we know that these guys, these decision makers are not hanging out on LinkedIn. They are not there, they're not listening. So, what's the point of incorporating a channel where your decision makers are just not present? A similar example where LinkedIn will not necessarily be necessary would probably be hospitality as a segment. It's not. So if we want to simplify, there's a lot of the unorganized industries like healthcare or hospitality, shipping and logistics. Sometimes and we've seen that these guys are not really hanging out on LinkedIn. So I would say there's very minimal benefit to be drawn from actually being out there and soliciting them on LinkedIn. On the other hand, like geography makes a difference as well, because I have seen this huge receptivity to cold calling, especially if you do it well and you do it correctly. In US as a market, maybe even India as a market, but in certain Asian countries and maybe even in Australia, I would say that it's really hard to get that cold calling bit right unless you have a local doing it, right? So then if you want to target, say, Australia through, like, let's say your team in India, I would say just go with LinkedIn and email, maybe not really cold calling, right? So geography plays a role, the ICP plays a role. It's kind of important to map out um, where is your audience most active and where are they willing to receive information and not have that backfire on you. So I think the call is taken on the basis of that. So for hospitals and hospitality segments, I'm going to use them as examples. We would probably use mainly cold calling, not even emails so much. We would use cold calling in all the phone-based channels, right? So that would be cold calling. It would be SMS, it would be WhatsApp, because that's where we get the maximum traction, the maximum response. So some of this, like, because we're an agency and we've worked with like more than 300, 400 companies, we know this information, it's mapped down, we have the data. But for a company that's sort of going it on their own, I would say test out everything for a couple of months. You'll be able to figure out, that this is not working, and then drop the ones that don't work. I think 3 months is enough for you to figure it out.
Okay, that's awesome. So my next question would be that how would you know if your mix is working? Like, I mean, to some element, there's always a degree of trial and error. So, what are the kind of cues you should be taking from your prospects, the way they're responding, and to determine that, okay, this mix is working for them? They're open to receiving inputs in this form on this channel. How do you judge how your cadence is working across the channels you've chosen?
So I think that the positive responses are the easy ones, right? Like, so when someone says, yeah, okay, I have this problem and I want to do a meeting, it's easy to interpret that. I don't think anyone needs help. I think, however, the chances of that happening in the beginning, when you've not yet figured out your campaign strategy, is low. So you really need to be interpreting the negative responses a lot more than the positive responses, right? So that's where tracking everything becomes important. You're really going to have to track, are they opening your email? If they're opening your email, but then they're not really replying to you, that's something. Your subject line is working, but your body is not working. If they're accepting your invitation, but then they're not really responding after that, maybe you're coming across as being too salesy on LinkedIn. Maybe you need to tone it down a little bit. This is a good example, right? Like there's one particular project one customer for whom, we realized recently, really good resource was not able to book meetings over cold calling for about a week or so, right? And then repeatedly, the reason that the prospects were saying was that, I already have 15-hour days. I just don't have the time to do these meetings, even though I understand that, this is a great product, right? And then we were talking about it internally, and we said, you know what? Like one of the things the product really talks about is the time efficiency it can accomplish. So why did you lead with, "Hey Steve, this is let's say Harinie from Leadle, and I know you already have a 15-hour day. I don't want to add to that, but you know what? I've built a product that aims to address this exact problem, which is to cut your day down by a few hours." And because you're the one that's built for, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Do you think we can do 10 minutes? And you
Right.
know what? Like people started responding, and I think the first night, the SDR booked 3 meetings with just making this one change. So it's like I feel like people are always talking to us. Prospects are always telling us things. The silence is telling us things. Their no's are telling us things. And even when they say no, like they're qualifying it with something. It's human nature to, sort of qualify, right? So they see something. And if you see a pattern, you need to be able to pick up on all of that. So here is where I think the SDR becomes really important, right? Because as a manager, you're not going to be able to look at every single message, every single call, listen to every single call. So they are the people talking to the customers, and they have the power to sort of note down all of this stuff, come back and say, hey, I am observing a pattern. This is what you're saying. I think we should leverage it. Can we talk about it, right? So that's how you know what's working and what's not working, by paying attention to the minor things: open rates, click rates, responses, negative responses. What are they saying in the negative responses? Like sometimes people say, this is not a problem for me at all. Doesn't mean you can't sell that product in that market. It probably means you're talking about it the wrong way in that market, right? For example, let's say you're selling an employee engagement tool, and you're doing it in the US, and you say, you know what, companies have incredible retention rates by using my product, and they say retention is not a problem for me. So doesn't mean you can't sell your product there. Just means that you need to be talking about a different capability that your product will bring, which will solve some other problem that they do have, right? So, but these are the cues. The no's are cues. The things they're saying are the cues you need to take and change what you're saying. This is what we call at Needle message market fit. Almost always, that's the problem. MMF is the problem. You're saying something, it worked in India, not working in the US. Doesn't mean the market is a problem. It means you're getting some element of your phrasing wrong, right? Um, I hope that answered your question.
No, absolutely. And you actually touched upon this already a bit, but like you rightly said, there's a lot of strategic decision making that goes behind setting up your cadence,
Mm-hmm,
which your SDR might not be a direct part of initially, at
mm-hmm.
least, but they play a very important role in identifying those cues that that
Correct.
tell you about what you can do forward. So, things similarly to that, what else can an SDR do to ensure the success of the campaign?
I actually want to say that rather than just execute, they need to own the campaign, and there is a lot of difference. Today, when I talk to already every founder, I tell them that hey, I want to hire all these SDRs, and I want to know how to make them more effective, more productive, more engaged. And I think all of this goes back to like hiring and training them. A lot of times we train SDRs to execute, but we don't really give them a sense or an understanding of how powerful their role actually is in being able to make a difference, right? So I think one, it's really important for SDRs to understand how they contribute to revenue as a whole, right? So rather than just talking to them about the meetings booked, it's really important for them to also understand how many of those meetings went well, how many of them became proposals and closures, what customers were onboarded as a consequence of their work. It's important for them to see the big picture because a lot of times what I see is SDR struggling with not understanding the impact they're making. This is where a lot of the friction comes, right? This was a good lead or it was not a good lead. Now, if everybody knows the end goal and what you're working for, I think that there will be a lot less friction. This is what we've seen, at least internally. Then the second thing is, I think, taking that ownership and recognizing that you could just be the guy that or the girl that executes, which means you bring very little to the table and you're very replaceable, right? And that's a big thing today with uh, layoffs happening everywhere. Like it's essentially how you do your job that makes you irreplaceable. So I would say that a person who's able to bring some thinking into the process. You may not necessarily do the strategizing, but you will know you're testing five different things. If all of your meetings are coming because you used one particular value proposition and that's related to the psychology of controlling a problem better, for example, or it is related to the psychology of improving bottom line, right? And so these things an SDR can come and tell you. Or if all the messages we're sending, the replies, the positive ones have come for these messages, so maybe we should change all the other messages and talk specifically about the one thing that seems to be resonating with our people. Now, if they're also able to write the content that that make that change, great. But even if not, this insight can only be given by that SDR, right? Mapping with all of this. No one else has the time or the bandwidth to go and look at every single thing like that.
Yeah.
So I think that one, understanding the big picture and two, knowing what they could do to, do a better job and do a job that kind of has direct impact on meetings booked as well as revenue, I think will make a lot of difference. That's what an SDR should be doing.
For sure. Take note, guys. So one thing I imagine you'll also be hearing is that there are a bunch of challenges to this process because ultimately it
Mhm.
is a long game and there are a lot of different moving parts involved because there are so many channels. I would imagine that one of the challenges would be to maintain the consistency of what you're saying across these channels, though you're saying it differently. So how would you do that? How would you advise people to maintain consistency in what you're saying, but still tailor it to the platform that you're using?
Um, I'll be very honest. I think that consistency is not as much of a problem if you start
Okay.
with mapping out the value proposition matrix, um, because that's where it all begins. Now, if you've
Right.
decided that this is what I'm going to say, so in the early stages, you will not have consistency because, in a certain sense, you're testing out different things, right?
Mhm.
You I would like to say that, like, for any company just starting out their outbound campaign, the first thing to figure out is really what ICP and what is the message market fit. Now, once you have figured it out, every outbound channel is just a method of distribution. The message stays the same. The people, the audience that you're sending it out to will stay the same. So, past your first 3 to 6 months, you're going to take the same message and really distribute it over different channels. And even with inbound, right, your paid ads will say the same story. Your
Right.
website is going to say the same story. So, that alignment will, I think it's only possible after you've understood what is really working or resonating for your audience. And it will take, I want to say, anything from 3 to 6 months, depending on how close you are to what the market wants to hear in the beginning. But once you figure it out, I think, let's say, for example, that everybody likes to, hear about um, uh, in today's environment, say profitability, right? I want to operate profitability. I want to become lean, right? So today, for instance, I think that let's say Outlay is going out and talking about their product to people. I think one thing that you may all want to consistent. I'm not saying this is the way to go about it. I'm saying maintaining consistency might be today's market is focusing on this. So let's talk about the fact that this is an all-in-one platform that is not just able to do what an SAP does, very, very well, but also can do call recording. It integrates calendar, and then there's data on the platform as well. So you truly don't need anything else, and it comes at this incredible price point, right? And this is where the market is going. Everybody today is looking at downsizing a tech stack and getting all-in-one functionality. Look at everything, like the acquisitions that are happening today. Everything indicates that the entire SaaS world is going in that direction. So talk about that consistently. Now, you do this for a couple of months and you feel like it's not giving you the kind of traction you want, then you might want to change. But
Right.
until then, you've got to do this, right?
Fair enough. Is there any other challenge that you've get your clients come up with to you?
Yes,
Like,
personalization.
that's a big one. Yep.
Yeah, it's a big one. Everyone wants to personalize, but like some of these personalizations are so trite, I don't see the meaning of those personalizations. Hey, I
Right.
saw that you got a new haircut and it's amazing, or I like your beard, I'm digging your beard. Like, why even say these
Just
things?
for the sake of doing it. It's like a token
Yeah,
person.
I hate it. I hate it. I wish that people would stop doing that and just focus on what they can do for me, and that is good enough. So, like, this is me, right? My personal take is relevance matters 500 times more than personalization. Although personalization is important, relevance is possible only when you personalize, right? So let me explain what I mean when I say that. Let's say you reach out to me and say, "Oh, Harinie, I saw that you also went to Texas A&M." I'm like, "Hey, hi, Samhita, great, I'll connect with you." But I'm not going to give you a meeting to discuss a product unless you're going to talk to my problem today, right? So maybe if you were to come and tell me, for example, that, "Hey, honey, I noticed that you connect with me, and you say this, and then you say, "Hey, I'm going to put it on the table that I noticed you're using these A, B, C, D products, and I just wanted to talk about, like, are you actually considering downsizing and going it with like one single platform?" And then maybe I would, because I'm actually thinking about it, I'll
Yep.
say, "Yeah, I am, but I've not really found a product that does everything that I wanted to do." And then maybe you can come and tell me, "Do you want to take a look at it out, please?" Right? But this only works if you know that I'm using ABCD products.
Yeah.
That's the kind of personalization that people should be focusing on, right? And honestly, even if you had not told me, "Hey, I saw you went to Tamu and you just came to me and said, I noticed you're using these products. I wondered if you're trying to downsize," I would still talk to you, right? Without that initial, same university thing, I would still talk to you because you're talking about something really relevant for me. So this is what I mean when I say that relevance is only possible with personalization. And so what we try and do, the challenge with personalization though, and this is the next big thing, right? Everybody wants to do this, do it really well, but also do it in a scalable manner. That is not overly dependent on an individual's capability to personalize, right?
Yeah.
That's a tough one, but one way that we have done this at Leadle is we do what is called bucketed personalization, right? We don't personalize to individuals, but we personalize to um, a very narrow ICP, right? So let's say I go and I say, I want to pick companies that are in the 50 to 100 employee range. It's a really narrow segment. I want to take tech companies in that segment. And for those tech companies, I want to take all the companies that are using product A, and then product B, and then product C and product D. So A could be all data platforms, right? And then you get a whole bunch of them. B could be all SCPs, you get a whole bunch of them. And then when you put them all together, you have like maybe 100 or 200 companies that fall into that category.
Right.
And for those 100 or 200 companies, I will send the same message, which is I see that you're using plugin product names and tell them that are you really thinking about downsizing? Because that's what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Then, bang on, I have a message that clearly talks about exactly the products that I'm using and it's talking to me about something I think about and then I'm going to respond to that message. So it is personalized. I feel it's written for me, but it's
Yeah.
really not. So I'm able to do this for like a hundred
Yeah.
prospects.
You've
And
scaled
then
it.
next week, yeah, next week I'm going to do that for, let's say, a different data platform, different SCP, that sort of combination. And then I'm going to come up with like 100 every week. But then for
Mm.
those 100 people, I have a set of messages and I'm not going to really change that around too much, right?
Right.
So that's what we do at Leadle when we want to personalize at scale because we noticed we weren't able to do more than 200 or 300 prospects if we were to do personalization the other way around. It's good, it gets you meetings, but it really doesn't get you meetings at scale. So then
Yeah.
we decided to put a process around this, and this is our process. So we
Hmm.
found that it's working quite well.
That's awesome. I think a lot of companies are looking for this. So I have a last question for you, and it's a biggish one, let's say. So I think maybe 5 years ago we would have never thought of or looked at LinkedIn or X or anything as a sales channel. It would have
Right,
never crossed our mind to use those as a
right.
sales channel. Do you see anything emerging like that, a trend emerging like that, say in the next few years that sales teams should be aware of? And more importantly, many things can come like that. How do sales teams get prepared for things like that to happen and get prepared to embrace that as and when they come?
So I think a big trend. So this is a tough question, right? But I have like one or two thoughts around this. May or may not be right, but I definitely think that a lot of these repetitive, jobs, like things that are, you just pick a number, bunch of prospects and send them out, they will all get automated, right? So I think that for the people in sales today, the people who are SDRs today or account executives today, they really need to look at like what parts of their jobs require them to bring the human in them and get really good at it. Because then, honestly, it's going to be very hard to replace them, right? I think that's going to absolutely be a trend. Like automate whatever can be automated with AI and do it well, and that's also going to advance in leaps and bounds. Um, that's something I absolutely see happening. I know that today people are saying no, no. I mean, it's not really good, but it's absolutely happening. Like that's how we function today. Something can be done with tech, and we can eliminate people. We do that, and we sort of put them into cold calls because that's something only an individual can do. Absolutely see that happening. The next thing I think is I want to say that people are going to use a lot of predictive analytics in campaigns,
Okay.
right? So just what we were talking about, it's kind of like an extension of that. We're doing this in a very rudimentary, I mean, not very rudimentary manner, but we're doing that at Lidl. But I feel like with tech emerging, it'll make it easier, right? See, as an agency, we have huge volumes of data about
Mm.
audiences, right? Like the North American market, they absolutely like cold calls. They do not like voicemails. They like this, they like that. You have like so much data about a
Yeah.
certain audience. And today, the only way that we are utilizing that information is with people like me, right? Like, have you read this book by Malcolm Gladwell called Blink?
No, I haven't. I've heard good things, but I haven't yet.
Yeah, so it talks about how like the human unconscious has this ability to just quickly look at a huge amount of information, take just the most important parts of it and make a quick decision, right? So that's the way we are using this data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we use it all the time, like salespeople with information and knowledge. We take all this data, look at it, and pick something, and we say this is what I expect. We should run the campaign as, and I think this is going to be successful. Now, with AI coming in and providing so much capability in that regard, I think the companies that have the data, and that's pretty much everybody, will be able to put it in and really sort of come out and say, hey, if you're going to target heads of operations of this size companies in the US market, then you use these channels because they like them. Talk about these problem statements because we've seen a lot of resonance there. And people should ideally be able to do it for their own companies with the data that they have. And I think that this is very exciting. If it comes up, I would be very, very happy. But I think it's definitely coming up.
Awesome. That's awesome. So I think this is amazing. I think outbound sales, one of the legs on which outbound sales stands is a multi-channel cadence, and I think this has been a gold mine for anybody who's listening. So, Honey, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise. I personally enjoyed. I'm a GTM person. I'm not a sales person, but so much of this has so much resonance with what I do and so much relevance to what I do. So, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for the information you shared. I had an awesome session. I'm sure everybody listening did too. Thank you so much for
Thank you
joining.
so much, Samhita. It was great being here.